Hello and welcome to the Clashing of Steel. And today I'm doing another tips and tricks video. Some of these tips may be a bit advanced, but most of them should still be pretty straightforward. So starting with flanking opponents. When you are engaged in combat and the opponents try to flank you, in that situation it is best to turn towards those opponents who are trying to flank you. Otherwise, you would be taking unnecessary damage for both morale and health. Or even in worst case scenario, you might get routed. As you saw it here, I turned towards the cavalry, took minimal damage, got no morale damage, and actually now I'm able to take them down. Although I did receive some damage from the charge impact, the moment he disengages he will lose more health than my units will. Another important thing is the positioning of the flankers, from what direction they're flanking. I'm going to go back to the start of this engagement. As you see, I'm using one of my units to flank from the side, and I'm sending the other one in from the rear. I'm not attacking the same units. He's definitely taking more damage because I'm flanking him from the side, but if I would come in from the rear, as you see it here, his morale would be depleting a lot faster and perhaps even eventually routing. Here I wanted to show how different flanking directions work, and the actual idea is that you can reposition yourself when you're flanking a bit badly. As you saw, one of my units was not flanking perfectly. In that situation you can pull back out, walk a bit around the opponent and perhaps charge in from the rear, improving your positioning and the morale damage inflicted to the opponents. Nothing is forcing you to flank from the side. You can always pull out, walk around them and come in from the rear. Well, the next tip is also about the engagements. More precisely said, that you don't have to stay engaged. I know it can be easy to say with Vercingetorix and Barbarian units. So you see me here going after the javelins with one of my Barbarian units. If they would be left undefended, I could probably finish them off. But soon the swordsmen are going to come and I will be disengaging. You even see my two other units here right now. I ain't yet engaging. Opponents are being highly aggressive and I don't need to engage. Perhaps I'm even somewhat kiting them, trying to create an ideal situation for myself. So now I'm disengaging with this unit. My single unit just can't stand this type of engagement, and so I'm pulling out and letting the swordsman take over. So here is another example. It's about a minute or so later. The opponents understand that they can't survive here. They're pulling out. As it is a right move, they're not doing it the right way. And because he's pulling out in a huge blob, I'm pulling out one of my units as well to block off their disengaging. And now, since they're blocked, they have nothing more to do. Okay, so the next tip is baiting out opponents' charges. This can be a two-way street. As you see it here, opponents charged and I charged to get away from them. I baited out their charge, I could now engage them and my friendlies from the rear could just charge into them, doing a lot of damage. Best way I could bait it out is so that I have my own charge left, but that is usually easiest to do with cavalry. You go close, opponents spend their charge, you disengage, you may lose one or two troops, then you re-engage on your own terms. Now I'm going to show you the second way to bait out opponents' charges. This is more about cavalry and creating their comfort zone. It means reacting at the very last moment to the incoming charge from the rear, as you saw it here. He was really comfortable, he was getting really close, he thought he was going to get his charge into my rear. But I reacted to it at the very last moment. If you react a bit sooner, the smart cavalry players will disengage. They will try to find another situation where you may not be aware of their location, their positioning, their strategy. So on to the next tip, opening testudos. This is probably easiest to do with the cavalry, baiting out opponents' charges and then engaging their testudos just to deactivate it and disengage. As it happened here, I broke their testudo by charging into it. They even used their vengeance. So I'm pulling back out, archers can free fire upon him. And when he reactivates the testudo, I'll do the same thing once again. I'll force him into combat and then I'll pull out once more. So this is a really simple tactic to use to support your archers, but I usually don't see anybody doing that. Whenever I'm playing cavalry and I see the Studo or something like that, I usually do it. With Leonidas or Spear or Pikemen, you don't even have to engage. You just need to go close enough for them to activate their phalanx, and it will deactivate the Fight in the Shades or some other arrow block ability immediately. You can also go close to bait out charges, as I said before, or you can just go close to force opponents into phalanx, and that way delaying them a bit. So another tip for supporting your team members. Perhaps a bit more precisely your ranged units. So building archers into a box is a nice way to start, but that's not the tip here. Okay, I'm doing some friendly fire, but as you see, the spearmen are pulling back. And while the spearmen are pulling back, I'm firing upon the opponents who are trying to engage them. And by doing that, opponents are taking a lot of fire. Because the spearmen are pulling back and the opponents are pushing forward, there is a small gap between the two, and into that gap will fall the arrows that would otherwise be the friendly fire, meaning that you will do very small amount of friendly fire. This tactic requires teamwork and is best done with spearmen, because they can disengage with their spears facing forward, but I have also made it work with the swordsmen. Only thing is, for that you need a bit more distance, because the swordsmen don't disengage like the spearmen. Okay, so the next tip is avoiding archer fire. The main idea here is to dodge, do a zigzag or so, if your unit is fast enough. But the other idea is, if you can't do it, if you can't dodge it, the barrage or just archer fire, you should always face towards them. That gives you the biggest arrow block. There are many situations where you're trying to disengage and the arrows are coming towards you. You may sometimes want to turn around and take them up from the front. With this in mind, you also need to dodge catapult fire, at least often enough. Dodging catapult fire can be easier if you see that they're shooting at you. If you know that they're shooting at you and if you see the projectile coming in. But there can be another way if you use the terrain properly. So here we are capturing the opponent's base, hiding behind a building. Catapult is firing upon us and the most shots hit the roof of the building. Or perhaps even the walls back there. Hiding behind buildings is a good way to block out catapult fire. But also, there are many maps where there aren't many buildings. In those maps, hiding in the forest or perhaps even behind the forest is the best solution. I'm not saying you need to camp in the forest, but if catapult is firing at you, you're on the open ground, in the grassy fields or somewhere, and there is a forest right next to you. If you're in the catapult's focus and you know you can't dodge it, you should probably pass through the forest. Although it may give you some penalties, you will survive a lot better in the forest against the catapult than on the open fields. Well, I know there are many maps where you just can't hide anywhere. You should probably spread a bit more out with your units in those situations. Because if your units are side by side, the catapult might miss one or two rocks and those may land into your nearby units. So if you're a bit spread, the missing rocks might actually hit nothing. And it can save a lot of troops. So the next tip is about the deployable consumables. As you see it right here, it can be used as a defensive tool, setting it up around you and defending your artillery. You can also hide the stakes into the forest or high grass, making it harder for the opponents to see. Usually in the forest it is best if you disengage, leaving stakes in there as a trap. In the high grass as well. But it's usually like this, when the opponents are coming towards you and they see you, they will probably check what is around you, if there are stakes on some side or something. But when they don't see you, they will usually be in the comfort zone and pay less attention towards what's under the forest or inside the grass. There are also the caltrops and the barricades. Barricades are usually to keep somebody out. Opponents can't charge through it, and it will take a while to destroy the barricades themselves. While the caltrops, on the other hand, are something you need to use right before the engagement. Either it's to slow down opponents or mess up their charges, both with melee infantries and ranged units. All of these consumables are under the Romans. They may give some tactical advantage we may need at certain locations, like putting stakes in the high grass where no one can see them. So on to the next tip. The light pila, or pila in general. It is so often misplayed. It is a great tool for T-capping, or throwing into the back of the disengaging opponents, or light armored opponents. But most often it is just thrown randomly into enemies. As you see back there, opponents are throwing the light pila. He was actually doing it the right way, my unit was disengaging, but at the last moment I turned around, so a lot of light pila missed, but he still did a lot of damage. Or at least the ones that hit me from the side. Light pila is probably one of the misused melee infantry throwable skills. The other ones like the flaming throw or heavy pila, they actually pack some punch, so throwing them from the head on actually does some damage, or at least reasonable damage. While throwing 3 light pilas from the front will do pretty much equal to the 1 unit's flaming throw. Light pila is probably one of the misused of all the pilas or the melee infantry's ranged skills. So throwing it randomly head on into opponents usually doesn't pay out that much. Throwing them into the rear or into the disengaging opponents can actually pay off, or just to decap. Okay, the final and probably the most important tip for the newcomers. Read the commander's skills. Read the commanders you're fighting against, read what skills they have, or just read them in general. Learn what activates and deactivates them, if there is any, or what they are, so you know what to expect from which commander. Or if you can, try to play them all and try to realize how the skills work. Okay, so these were the tips and tricks. Some of them may be a bit advanced, some of them may be slightly used or not used at all, but these tips are often best used with team that cooperates. Disengaging, engaging, setting up stakes, barricades, blocks, whatever. Baiting out certain skills, team working with archers and spears for example, and so. Most of these tips were teamwork based, so for it to work properly, you require team members who know, listen and understand. It may be hard to find in this modern day and era, but hopefully there are few left. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe and thanks for watching.